The words hit me like a physical blow, delivered in the innocent whisper of an 8-year-old boy who didn't understand the weight of what he was saying. "Grandpa, Daddy has a girlfriend, and when you travel, they're going to sell your house." Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. Christian's small hand was still wrapped around mine as we walked back from the ice cream truck, vanilla dripping down his fingers in the afternoon heat. My grandson looked up at me with those bright blue eyes, the same ones his grandmother had, completely unaware that he'd just shattered my world into a million pieces. I stopped walking, just stopped right there on the sidewalk, my legs suddenly feeling like they might give out beneath me. 79 years old, and I thought I'd experienced every kind of pain life could throw at me. I was wrong. "What did you say, buddy?" I managed to keep my voice steady, grandfatherly, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "Daddy told his friend on the phone that you're going on a big trip, and then they can finally sell the house. He said the lady with the pretty hair would help him." Christian took another lick of his ice cream, completely absorbed in preventing it from melting. I wasn't supposed to hear, but I was getting my toy from under the couch. The lady with the pretty hair. My mind raced through the implications. David had been bringing someone around when I wasn't home. Someone I'd never met, never been introduced to. My 30-year-old son, who I'd raised alone after his mother died when he was 12, was planning to sell my house out from under me. "Christian," I said carefully, "did Daddy say anything else about the trip?" "He said you'd be gone for a really long time, maybe forever, and that would make everyone happy." The innocence in his voice made it worse somehow. "But I told him I'd miss you, and he said I'd understand when I'm older." Forever. The word echoed in my mind as we continued walking toward my house. The house where I'd brought David home from the hospital. The house where his mother and I had raised him, loved him, sacrificed everything for him. The house where she died in my arms 15 years ago, making me promise to always take care of our boy. This was how he planned to honor her memory. I kept my expression neutral as we reached my front door, but inside, everything was crumbling. Christian ran inside to wash his sticky hands, and I stood there in my entryway, looking at 40 years of memories, wondering how long David had been planning this betrayal. The trip to Ireland, 3 weeks touring the countryside, something I'd been saving for since retirement. David had been so encouraging about it, so insistent that I deserved the vacation, that I should live a little while I still could. Now I understood why he'd been so eager to help me plan it, so interested in the exact dates I'd be gone. I walked into my kitchen and sat down heavily at the table where David and I had eaten countless meals together, where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd talked through his teenage problems, where I'd given him advice about college, careers, life, where I thought we'd built something unbreakable between us. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. The travel agent's number was still in my recent calls from yesterday's final confirmation. 3 more days until departure. 3 more days until David could execute whatever plan he'd been carefully constructing. "Hello, this is Margaret at Emerald Tours. How can I help you?" "This is Harry Peterson. I need to cancel my Ireland trip." "Oh no, Mr. Peterson. I'm so sorry to hear that. Is everything all right? We were so excited about your itinerary." Everything all right. If only she knew. "Family emergency," I said, because it wasn't exactly a lie. "I won't be able to travel after all." After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my kitchen and tried to process what Christian had told me. David thought I was going to be gone forever. Not just 3 weeks. Forever. What exactly was he planning? And who was this woman with the pretty hair who was helping him? The sound of Christian's laughter drifted in from the living room where he was watching cartoons. My grandson, the only pure thing left in this mess. What would happen to him when David got whatever he was after? Would I ever see him again? I forced myself to stand up and walk into the living room, settling into my old recliner next to the couch where Christian lay sprawled on his stomach, chin propped on his hands. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to sound casual. You know how Daddy's been talking about me going on that trip? Uh-huh. Christian didn't look away from the television. Has he mentioned anything about what happens when I come back? Christian finally turned to look at me, his expression puzzled. Come back? But Daddy said you weren't coming back. That's why they have to sell the house and why I can't leave my toys here anymore. The room spun around me. I gripped the arms of my chair and forced myself to breathe. What do you mean you can't leave your toys here anymore? Daddy said after you leave on your trip, we won't be coming to visit anymore because the house won't be ours. He said we'll have a new house with the pretty lady and I'll have to bring all my toys there. A new house with the pretty lady? My son was planning to move in with someone I'd never met, using money from selling my home. The home his mother and I had worked 2 jobs each to pay off. The home where every room held memories of the family we'd built together. I must have made some sound because Christian sat up and looked at me with concern. Are you okay, Grandpa? You look sad. I'm fine, sweetheart, I lied, forcing a smile. Just thinking about my trip. But I wasn't thinking about any trip. I was thinking about the 30 years I'd spent raising David after his mother died. The nights I'd stayed up with him when he was sick. The baseball games, the school plays, the graduation ceremonies. The times he'd called me his hero, his best friend, the only parent he needed. I was thinking about how he'd moved back in with me 2 years ago when he lost his job, and how grateful he'd seemed for my support. How he'd promised it was temporary, just until he got back on his feet. How he'd been so attentive, so helpful, so concerned about my well-being. All of it had been a lie. All of it had been leading to this moment, when he could dispose of me permanently and claim his inheritance while I was still alive. My phone buzzed with a text message. David's name appeared on the screen. Hey, Dad, just confirming your flight is Saturday morning. Can't wait for you to have this adventure. You deserve it. You deserve it. The cruelty of those words hit me like a slap. He wasn't wrong. I did deserve something. But it wasn't a one-way trip to nowhere. It was the truth about what my son had become. And more importantly, it was the chance to show him exactly who he was dealing with. I looked at Christian, still watching his cartoons, still innocent of the war that was about to begin in his family. Whatever David was planning, whatever scheme he'd constructed, he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his father. The old man he thought he could easily manipulate and discard had been running a successful business for 40 years. The father he saw as a convenient obstacle had survived the Great Depression as a child, built a life from nothing, and raised a son alone through sheer determination. David thought he was dealing with a weak, trusting old fool. He was about to discover he'd been planning his war against a man who'd been fighting battles since before his son was born. And this was one battle David was going to lose. I spent that night staring at my bedroom ceiling, my mind racing through everything Christian had told me. By morning, I'd made my decision. If David wanted to play games, I'd give him the performance of a lifetime. I came downstairs at my usual time, made my coffee, and read the newspaper just like any other day. When David emerged from his room around 9:30, I was ready. "Morning, son," I said cheerfully, not looking up from the sports section. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Morning, Dad." His voice carried that false warmth I was beginning to recognize. "All set for your big adventure tomorrow?" "Oh, yes," I replied, turning the page with deliberate calm. I can hardly contain my excitement. I watched him over the top of my newspaper as he moved around the kitchen, pouring coffee, checking his phone. He looked relaxed, confident, a man whose plan was proceeding perfectly. It made my stomach turn. "You know," I said, folding the paper and setting it aside, "I've been thinking about what you said last week, about me getting out more, seeing the world while I still can." David's head snapped up, interest sharpening his features. "Yeah? You were right. I've been too cautious, too set in my ways." I stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the garden his mother had planted 20 years ago. A man my age shouldn't be so attached to material things. Houses, possessions, they're just things, aren't they? Exactly, David said, and I could hear the excitement creeping into his voice. Life is about experiences, Dad, adventures. You can't take any of this stuff with you. Can't take it with you. The irony was almost funny. He was talking about death, of course, my death. His plan apparently involved me never returning from Ireland at all. I've been thinking about that too, I said, turning back to face him. About what happens to all this when I'm gone. You know, son, you've been so good to me these past 2 years. So patient, so caring. David's face lit up with what I suppose he thought was a modest expression. You're my father, Dad. It's what families do. Families. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. Taking care of the house while I'm away, handling things, it means everything to me. Of course, don't worry about anything here. I'll take care of everything. I'll bet you will, I thought. But my expression remained grateful, trusting. Have I mentioned how proud your mother would be of the man you've become? The way you've stepped up, taken responsibility? Something flickered across his face at the mention of his mother. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at having his dead mother dragged into his scheme. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that practiced smile. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. I spent the rest of the morning acting like a man preparing for the trip of a lifetime. I pulled out my suitcase, sorted through clothes, made lists of things to remember, all while David watched with poorly concealed satisfaction. Around noon, he announced he was going out for a while. Meeting a friend for lunch, he said casually. You'll be okay here alone? Of course. You go enjoy yourself. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I was on the phone. If David thought he was the only one who could make plans, he was about to learn otherwise. Law offices of Mitchell and Associates. This is Sarah speaking. This is Harry Peterson. I need to speak with Robert Mitchell about updating my will. It's urgent. I can schedule you for next week, Mr. Peterson. No, you don't understand. I need to see him today. I'm traveling tomorrow, and this can't wait. Something in my voice must have convinced her, because 40 minutes later, I was sitting across from Robert Mitchell's mahogany desk, explaining my situation. Let me understand this correctly, Harry, Robert said, his pen poised over his legal pad. You want to establish a trust fund for your grandson with specific conditions about when and how the money can be accessed? That's right, and I want to change the primary beneficiary of my will. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. From your son to your grandson? From my son to a combination of my grandson and the children's hospital where my wife volunteered. David can have the furniture and personal items, but the house and the money go elsewhere. Harry, this is a significant change. Are you certain you want to do this? Have you discussed it with David? I thought about Christian's innocent words yesterday, about David's eagerness for my trip, about the mysterious woman with pretty hair who was apparently part of his plan. I'm certain, I said firmly, and no, I haven't discussed it with David. I don't plan to. We spent 2 hours going over the details. Robert was thorough, asking questions about my mental state, my reasons for the changes. Documenting everything carefully. By the time I left his office, my affairs were in order. But I wasn't done. My next stop was First National Bank, where I'd been a customer for 35 years. Tom Bradley, the branch manager, knew me well enough to accommodate an unusual request. I want to set up a new account, I explained, checking and savings, in my name only, and I want to transfer most of my assets there. Most of your assets? Tom looked concerned. Harry, is everything all right? Everything's fine, Tom. I'm just taking some precautions. Family matters, you understand. Tom processed the paperwork without further questions, though I could see the curiosity in his eyes. By closing time, the joint accounts David could access contained exactly enough money to cover the mortgage payment and utilities for 1 month. Everything else was safely locked away where only I could reach it. I arrived home to find David in the kitchen, humming while he prepared dinner. He looked up as I walked in, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. There was a lightness to his expression, an almost giddy excitement he was trying to suppress. "How was your day, Dad? Get everything ready for tomorrow?" "All set," I said, hanging up my jacket. "Passport, tickets, everything packed. I feel like a new man." "That's great." He turned back to the stove, stirring something that smelled like his mother's recipe for beef stew. "I thought we could have a nice dinner tonight. You know, a send-off meal." A send-off meal. The word sent a chill down my spine. How final did he expect this send-off to be? "That sounds wonderful, son. Very thoughtful of you." During dinner, David was more animated than I'd seen him in months. He talked about my trip with enthusiasm, asking about my itinerary, suggesting places I should visit, experiences I shouldn't miss. Every word felt like another nail in my coffin. "You know, Dad," he said as we finished eating, "I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about not being too attached to material things." "Oh?" "I think that's really wise. I mean, this house, it's just a building, right? What matters is the memories, the love that was shared here." I nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother always said that." "Exactly. And those memories, they go with you wherever you are. They're not tied to a place. Wherever I am, assuming I was going to be anywhere at all." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "In fact, I've been thinking I might extend my trip, really take my time, see more of Europe while I'm there." David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Extend it? For how long?" "Oh, I don't know. Months, maybe? Why rush back? Like you said, life is about experiences." I watched his face carefully. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Panic? Calculation? Then the mask slipped back into place. "That sounds amazing, Dad. Really amazing." "You deserve to take all the time you want." "I thought you'd be happy about that." "I am. I'm thrilled for you." After dinner, David excused himself to make some phone calls. I cleaned up the dishes and tried not to think about what those calls might involve. Plans being accelerated, maybe? Timelines being adjusted. Around 10 o'clock, as I was getting ready for bed, David knocked on my bedroom door. "Dad, I just wanted to say how much I'm going to miss you." He stood in my doorway, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into this bed when he had nightmares. The child who'd clung to me at his mother's funeral, who told me I was the strongest person in the world. "I'll miss you too, son," I said, and despite everything, part of me meant it. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, David." After he left, I sat on the edge of my bed and wondered if any part of him actually did love me, or if those words were just another piece of his performance. Either way, it didn't matter now. Tomorrow, the real show would begin. David thought he was sending a trusting old man off to his fate. Instead, he was about to discover that the man he'd been lying to had been watching, learning, and planning a performance of his own. And unlike David's show, mine was going to have a very different ending. I woke up at 5 in the morning, not because I had a flight to catch, but because my mind wouldn't let me sleep. Today was supposed to be the day I disappeared from David's life forever. Instead, it would be the day I started testing just how deep his betrayal ran. I made coffee in the quiet darkness of my kitchen and sat at the table where I'd eaten breakfast for 30 years. In a few hours, David would expect me to be on a plane to Ireland. Instead, I'd be right here, watching his true nature unfold. At 7:30, I heard David's alarm go off upstairs. I quickly moved to the living room and positioned myself in my chair with a book, as if I'd been up reading for hours. When he came downstairs, I wanted him to see exactly what he expected to see. "Dad?" David appeared in the doorway, hair disheveled, wearing the concerned expression of a dutiful son. "What are you doing up so early? Your flight isn't until 11. "Couldn't sleep," I said, not looking up from my book. Too excited, I suppose. "You should try to rest a little more. It's going to be a long day of traveling." Yes, I thought bitterly, a very long day indeed. David made himself coffee and toast, moving around the kitchen with an energy I hadn't seen in months. He was practically humming under his breath. Every few minutes, he'd glance at his phone, checking the time. At 9 o'clock, he knocked on my bedroom door, where I was supposedly finishing my packing. "Dad, we should head to the airport soon. Don't want you to miss your flight." "Just a few more minutes," I called back. "I'm having trouble deciding what to leave behind." What to leave behind? The irony wasn't lost on either of us. At 9:30, I emerged from my room with my suitcase and carry-on bag, every inch the excited traveler. David's face lit up when he saw me. "All ready?" "Ready as I'll ever be." The drive to the airport was the longest 30 minutes of my life. David kept up a steady stream of cheerful conversation, reminding me about my hotel reservations, my tour bookings, the phone number of the travel company in case I needed anything. "And remember, Dad, don't worry about anything here. I'll take care of everything. The house, the yard, all of it." "I know you will, son. I trust you completely." The words tasted like poison in my mouth, but David's smile grew wider with each one. At the airport, he insisted on walking me all the way to the security checkpoint. He hugged me goodbye, a long, tight embrace that might have fooled anyone watching into thinking we were a loving father and son sharing an emotional farewell. "Have the time of your life, Dad," he whispered in my ear. "You deserve this." "Thank you, David, for everything." I watched him walk away, his step light and confident. He thought he'd just solved all his problems. He had no idea he'd just created new ones. I waited until his car had pulled away from the curb. Then I collected my luggage and took a taxi to the Marriott Hotel downtown. I'd made a reservation there yesterday while David was out, using a credit card he didn't know about. For the next 3 hours, I sat in my hotel room and waited. At 2 o'clock, right around the time my plane would have been taken off for Dublin, I called my own house. David answered on the first ring. "Hello?" "David, it's Dad." There was a pause, a long pause. "Dad, but your flight, I thought you'd be in the air by now." "There was a problem with the plane, mechanical issues. They've delayed the flight until tomorrow morning." Another pause. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. "Oh no, that's terrible. Where are you?" "Still at the airport. They're putting us up in a hotel overnight." "Do you want me to come get you? You could spend the night at home and try again tomorrow." No, the airline is handling everything. I'll just tough it out here." "But David, I wanted to ask you something." "Sure, Dad, anything." I took a deep breath. This was the first real test. I was thinking, maybe this delay is a sign. Maybe I should postpone the whole trip, come home and try again next month. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here. I'm just, well, disappointed for you. You've been looking forward to this trip for so long." "I know, but maybe it's not the right time." "No." The word came out sharper than he'd intended. I heard him catch himself, soften his tone. "I mean, no, Dad, you shouldn't let a little delay ruin your plans." "You deserve this vacation. You've earned it." "But maybe I could come home tonight and we could talk about it." "Dad, listen to me." David's voice took on that patient, condescending tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "You're at the airport, your luggage is checked, the hotel is paid for. Just stick with the plan. Sometimes things don't go perfectly, but that doesn't mean you should give up." Give up on what, I wondered? The trip or disappearing from his life forever? I suppose you're right. I know I'm right. Trust me, Dad, this is what's best for you. What's best for me? The audacity was breathtaking. "Okay, son, I'll stay the course." "Good, that's my dad. Now get some rest and call me when you land in Dublin tomorrow, all right?" "I will." "David?" "Yeah?" "I love you." "I love you too, Dad. Have a safe flight." After I hung up, I sat in my hotel room and marveled at what I just heard. When I'd suggested coming home, the panic in David's voice had been unmistakable. He couldn't afford for me to return. Whatever plans he had for tomorrow depended on me being gone. At 6 o'clock, I took a taxi to within 2 blocks of my house and walked the rest of the way. I let myself in through the back door, using the spare key I kept hidden under the garden gnome his mother had loved. The house was dark, but I could hear voices coming from the living room. David's voice and a woman's voice I didn't recognize. The pretty lady, no doubt. I crept quietly toward the sound, staying in the shadows of the hallway. Through the archway to the living room, I could see David sitting on the couch with a young woman. She looked to be in her mid-20s, blonde, attractive in a hard sort of way. She was holding a sheaf of papers. "So the old man's really gone?" she was saying. "Flight got delayed until tomorrow, but yeah, he's gone. Called me from the airport all confused and helpless. Perfect. And you're sure he's not coming back?" David laughed, and the sound made my blood run cold. "Jessica, trust me. My father is 79 years old, traveling alone to a foreign country. Things happen to old people when they travel. Heart attacks, accidents, getting lost and confused. He might not even make it past the first week. But what if he does? Then we'll deal with it. But honestly, I don't think we'll have to worry about it for long." Jessica nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "Good, because I already talked to the realtor. She thinks we can get at least $400,000 for this place, maybe more if we stage it right." $400,000? I'd bought this house for $38,000 in 1974. My wife and I had spent decades turning it into a home, and now this stranger was discussing it like a commodity. "What about the contents?" Jessica asked. "Some of this furniture looks valuable." "Estate sale company will handle all that. They take a percentage, but it's worth it not to have to deal with sorting through 40 years of junk." 40 years of junk. My wife's china, her jewelry, the rocking chair where I'd held David as a baby, the dining room table where we'd celebrated every birthday, every holiday, every milestone in our son's life. All of it was junk to him. "How long before we can put it on the market?" Jessica was asking. "Realtor says we should wait at least a month. Make it look like we tried to reach him, like we're worried. Then we can file for a missing person report, get legal authority to handle his affairs." "A month?" Jessica mused. "I can live with that." "In the meantime," David said, reaching for her hand, "we can start moving your stuff in, make ourselves comfortable." They kissed, and I had to grip the doorframe to keep from rushing in there and throwing them both out. But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep listening. "There's one thing that bothers me," Jessica said when they broke apart. "What about your kid? Doesn't he visit here?" "Christian." David's voice went flat. "Yeah, that's a complication. But Sandra's been pretty cooperative about limiting his visits. Kid asks too many questions anyway." Sandra, David's ex-wife, Christian's mother. My grandson's access to me was being limited as part of this conspiracy. "Can't you just tell her the old man moved away?" Jessica asked. "Eventually. For now, I'll just say he's traveling. By the time anyone starts asking serious questions, we'll have the house sold and be long gone. Long gone. My son was planning to take the money from my house, my life's work, and disappear with this woman. And my grandson would never know what happened to his grandfather." I'd heard enough. More than enough. I slipped back through the kitchen and out the back door, my heart pounding with rage and betrayal. But underneath the anger was something else. Something cold and calculating. David thought he was so clever, so carefully planned. He had no idea that his father had just learned everything he needed to know. And unlike David, when I made plans, I didn't leave anything to chance. Tomorrow, while David thought I was flying away forever, I'd be putting together the pieces of his downfall. And by the time I was finished, he'd discover that underestimating a 79-year-old man had been the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, I called David from my hotel room at exactly the time my flight would have departed for Dublin. "Dad!" His voice was bright, cheerful. "How was the flight? Did you make it to Dublin okay?" "Just landed," I lied smoothly. "The flight was wonderful. I'm at the hotel now." "That's fantastic. How's Ireland treating you?" I looked out the window of my downtown hotel room at the familiar cityscape I'd known my entire life. "It's beautiful, son. Everything I dreamed it would be." We talked for a few more minutes, David asking questions about my supposed journey, me providing carefully crafted answers based on travel guides I'd studied online. When I hung up, I could hear the relief in his voice. As far as he knew, his problem had just boarded a plane and flown 3,000 miles away. But I wasn't done gathering intelligence. I spent the morning making phone calls, starting with Sandra, Christian's mother. David and Sandra had divorced 2 years ago, and their relationship had been strained ever since. But Sandra had always been fond of me, and I hoped that fondness might help me understand what was really happening. "Harry?" Sandra's voice was warm but surprised. "I thought you were traveling to Ireland." "I am. I'm calling from Dublin." The lie came easier now. "I wanted to check on Christian before I got too busy with sightseeing." "Oh, that's sweet of you. He's at school right now, but he's doing fine." "Good, good. Sandra, can I ask you something? David mentioned that Christian's visits to my house might be less frequent for a while. Is everything all right?" There was a pause. "Harry, I thought you knew. David said you'd agreed that Christian shouldn't visit while you were traveling. Something about the house being empty and it being too hard on him." "Of course," I said carefully. "I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable with the arrangement." "Well, honestly, I wasn't entirely comfortable with it. Christian loves spending time with you. But David seemed to think it was best, and since you'd apparently agreed." "What exactly did David tell you about my travel plans?" Another pause, longer this time. "He said you were going on an extended European tour, months, maybe longer. He said you decided you wanted to really explore while you still could." Months, maybe longer. The story was getting more elaborate each time David told it. "Did he mention anything else about the house, or—" "He did say something about you thinking of selling it eventually, that the upkeep was getting to be too much for you." My grip on the phone tightened. "He said I was thinking of selling the house?" "Yes, he said you'd asked him to start looking into what it might be worth, just to have the information." "Harry, are you really thinking of selling? That house means so much to you." "Just exploring options," I managed. "Nothing definite." After I hung up with Sandra, I sat in my hotel room trying to process what I'd learned. David hadn't just been planning to sell my house while I was gone. He'd been laying groundwork for weeks, maybe months, preparing everyone in our lives for my extended absence, my eventual decision to sell, my gradual disappearance from their lives. The scope of his deception was staggering. My next call was to my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who'd lived next door for 15 years. "Harry, dear, how's Ireland? David told me you'd finally taken that trip you'd been talking about." "It's wonderful, Mrs. Henderson, but I'm calling because I'm a little worried about the house while I'm gone. Has everything seemed normal over there?" "Oh yes, David's been taking good care of things, though I have to say, I was surprised to see the young lady moving things in yesterday. I didn't realize David had a girlfriend." "Moving things in? Yesterday? The day after my supposed departure? A young lady?" "Yes, pretty blonde girl. She had quite a few suitcases. I assumed David had told you she'd be staying there while you were away." "Of course," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "I just wanted to make sure everything was going smoothly." "Oh yes, they seem very happy together. Though I must say, they had quite a loud celebration last night. Music, laughter. I almost called to complain, but then I figured they were just excited about something." A celebration? They'd celebrated my departure, my supposed disappearance from their lives. "Mrs. Henderson, did David mention anything to you about how long I'd be traveling?" "He said you were planning an extended trip, maybe moving somewhere warmer eventually. Said you'd gotten tired of the winters here." There it was again, the careful preparation for my permanent absence. After I hung up, I realized I needed to see this with my own eyes. I took a taxi back to my neighborhood and positioned myself in Riverside Park, where I had a clear view of my house from behind a cluster of oak trees. At around 2 o'clock, David and Jessica emerged from my front door. Jessica was carrying a shopping bag from an expensive furniture store downtown. They got into David's car and drove away, laughing about something. I waited 10 minutes, then approached my house. Using my key, I let myself in through the front door. What I saw made my stomach lurch. Jessica hadn't just moved in, she'd started redecorating. My wife's favorite lamp was gone from the living room, replaced by something modern and angular. The family photos on the mantelpiece had been moved aside to make room for fashion magazines and Jessica's cosmetics. In the kitchen, my wife's coffee mug, the one that said "World's Best Mom" that David had given her for Mother's Day 20 years ago, had been replaced by a sleek black mug with some designer logo. But it was the bedroom that broke my heart. They'd moved into the master bedroom, my bedroom, the room where my wife had died, where I'd held her hand and promised to take care of our son. Jessica's clothes hung in my wife's closet. Her perfume bottles sat on my wife's vanity. On the nightstand next to the bed, I found something that made my blood boil. A real estate listing form, partially filled out. My house, described as a charming 3-bedroom colonial in established neighborhood. Under reason for sale, someone had written, "Estate liquidation." Estate liquidation. As if I were already dead. I took photos of everything with my phone, documenting the violation of my home, the desecration of my wife's memory. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it and let myself out. But I wasn't finished. If David and Jessica thought they could erase me from existence, they were about to learn that disappearing someone required more than just sending them on a trip. My next stop was the offices of Peterson Accounting, where I'd done business for 20 years. Martha Peterson, no relation despite the shared name, had handled my taxes and financial planning since her father retired. "Harry, I thought you were in Ireland." "I am. I'm calling from my hotel in Dublin." The lie was becoming routine now. "Martha, I need a favor. Can you run a credit check on David? I'm thinking of adding him to some of my accounts while I'm traveling, and I want to make sure his credit is solid." "Of course. Give me an hour and I'll call you back." When Martha called back, her voice was troubled. "Harry, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but David's credit report is concerning." "How concerning?" "He's got significant debt. Credit cards maxed out, a personal loan in default, and several missed payments on various accounts. His credit score is in the low 500s. "How much debt are we talking about?" "Total? Probably close to $80,000. $80,000? No wonder David was desperate to get his hands on my house. "Martha, is there anything else I should know?" "Well, there are some inquiries from collection agencies, recent ones. And Harry, there's something else. Someone's been asking questions about your financial situation." My blood went cold. "What kind of questions?" "About your assets, your estate planning, whether you'd made any recent changes to your will. The person claimed to be your son, said he was trying to help you organize your affairs." "When was this?" "About 3 weeks ago. I didn't give out any information, of course, but I thought you should know." 3 weeks ago, long before my planned trip. David had been investigating my finances, probably trying to figure out exactly how much money he'd inherit when I conveniently disappeared. "Martha, I need you to do something for me. I want you to flag my accounts. If anyone tries to access information about my finances, even someone claiming to be family, I want to know about it immediately." "Consider it done, Harry." After I hung up, I sat in my hotel room and tried to comprehend the full scope of what David had planned. This wasn't just about selling my house while I was away. This was about erasing me completely, taking everything I'd worked for and starting a new life with Jessica using my money. The debt explained everything. David wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. $80,000 in debt with collection agencies closing in. My disappearance wasn't just convenient for him, it was necessary. I thought about the conversation I'd overheard the night before. David's casual mention of things happening to old people when they travel. Heart attacks, accidents, getting lost and confused. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the full implication of his words. David wasn't just planning to steal from me. He was planning for me to never come back at all. Whether that meant hoping I'd die naturally during my travels, or whether he had more active plans for ensuring my permanent absence, I couldn't be sure. But one thing was crystal clear. My son had moved far beyond simple theft. He was planning my destruction. But David had made one crucial error in his calculations. He'd assumed that a 79-year-old man would be easy to manipulate, easy to dispose of, easy to forget. He was about to discover that some old men fight back, and when they do, they fight with the wisdom and cunning that comes from surviving nearly 8 decades in a world that's never been particularly kind to the weak. The war David had started was about to become very real, and unlike him, I wasn't planning to leave anything to chance. For 3 days, I watched from the shadows as David and Jessica made themselves at home in my house. I documented everything. Photos of Jessica's belongings scattered through my wife's spaces. Video of them loading my possessions into David's car, presumably to sell or discard. Evidence of the systematic erasure of my life. On the 4th day, I was ready to strike back. My first move was a phone call to David, supposedly from my hotel in Dublin. "Dad, how's the trip going?" "Wonderful, son, but I've got some news. I've been thinking about what you said before I left, about not being too attached to material things." "Yeah? Well, I've made a decision. I'm going to extend my trip indefinitely. I might even relocate to Ireland permanently." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Permanently?" David's voice cracked slightly. "Why not? The cost of living here is reasonable, the people are friendly, and I feel more alive than I have in years. I think I'm going to sell the house." "Sell the house?" He was trying to sound surprised, but I could hear the excitement underneath. "Yes, I want you to handle it for me. You've always been so good with these things. I'm going to sign over power of attorney so you can manage the sale while I'm here." "Dad, that's a big decision. Are you sure you don't want to come home and think it over?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. David, I'm 79 years old. How many chances do I get to start over?" We talked for another 10 minutes, David playing the part of the concerned son while I could practically hear him calculating dollar signs. When I hung up, I knew he'd take the bait. 2 hours later, I called Robert Mitchell. "Harry, good to hear from you. How's Ireland treating you?" "Robert, I need you to prepare some documents for me. Power of attorney papers, property transfer forms, the works." "For David?" "Yes, but not quite in the way he's expecting. I want you to prepare 2 sets of documents, one real set and one that will become invalid the moment David tries to use it." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Harry, what exactly are you planning?" "Justice, Robert. Just justice." The next phase of my plan required perfect timing. I called David back that evening. "Son, I've spoken with my lawyer. He's preparing the power of attorney documents, but there's one condition." "What's that, Dad?" "I want to see Christian one more time before I make this permanent. I want to say goodbye properly." "Dad, you know Sandra's been limiting his visits. Maybe it's better to just let him remember you the way you were." "David," I let steel creep into my voice, "I'm about to sign over a $400,000 house to you. I think I've earned the right to see my grandson one more time." Another pause. "Of course, Dad, you're absolutely right. I'll arrange something." "Good. And David, I want you there too. I want us all to be together one last time." The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon at Riverside Park, the same place where I'd first spied on my own house. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived early and positioned myself where I could see David and Christian before they saw me. When they appeared, walking hand in hand across the grass, my heart broke a little. Christian looked so small next to his father, so trusting. "Grandpa!" Christian ran toward me the moment he spotted me, throwing himself into my arms with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. "Hello, buddy," I said, holding him tight and breathing in the scent of his shampoo. "I've missed you so much." Daddy said you went to Ireland. Did you see any castles? I did, I lied smoothly, and I took pictures just for you. I pulled out my phone and showed him photos I downloaded from tourism websites. His eyes went wide with wonder as I described imaginary adventures through the Irish countryside. David stood nearby, checking his watch with barely concealed impatience. He thought this was just a formality, a sentimental goodbye before his inheritance became official. "Christian," I said, pulling my grandson aside, "I need to tell you something important." "What, Grandpa?" "I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you, I love you more than anything in the world. And if you ever need me, really need me, you can always find me." "But Daddy said you're moving far away." "Maybe I am, and maybe I'm not. But here's a secret just between us." I pulled a small piece of paper from my pocket. "This is a special phone number. If you ever can't reach me at the regular number, you call this one, okay? And you don't tell anyone else about it." Christian nodded solemnly and tucked the paper into his pocket. "Promise me you'll remember." "I promise, Grandpa." David was walking toward us now, his patience finally exhausted. "Dad, we should probably wrap this up. Christian has homework and I have some errands to run." "Of course," I said, standing up and brushing grass off my knees. "David, walk with me for a minute." We moved away from Christian, who was now occupied with feeding ducks at the pond. "I want you to know how proud I am of you," I said, watching David's face carefully. "The way you've stepped up, taken responsibility for the house, for Christian, your mother would be so proud." David's expression softened slightly. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy I'd raised, the child who'd once looked up to me as his hero. "Thanks, Dad. That means everything to me." "I know it does, and I want you to know that everything I'm doing because I trust you completely. I won't let you down. I know you won't." We said our goodbyes, another elaborate performance of father-son affection. But as I watched David walk away with Christian, I felt a profound sadness. This really might be the last time I saw my son as my son, before he became simply a stranger who'd betrayed me. The next morning, I received a call from Robert Mitchell. "Harry, David's been to my office. He's asking about the power of attorney documents." "What did you tell him?" "That they'd be ready by Wednesday, just as you instructed. He seemed very eager to get them." "I'm sure he did." "Robert, is everything in place for Wednesday?" "Everything. The real documents transferring all your assets to the trust for Christian, and the fake power of attorney that will trigger the investigation the moment David tries to use it." "And the other preparations?" "All set. The bank has been notified, the police have been briefed, and your friend at the district attorney's office is standing by." Wednesday arrived gray and rainy, fitting weather for what I was about to do. I positioned myself across the street from Robert's office, watching through the window of a coffee shop. At 2 o'clock, David arrived. He was dressed in his best suit, carrying himself with the confidence of a man about to inherit a fortune. I watched him disappear into the building and waited. 20 minutes later, he emerged with a manila envelope tucked under his arm. The fake power of attorney documents. He practically skipped to his car. I gave him a 30-minute head start, then made my move. The real estate office where Jessica worked was in a strip mall on the outskirts of town. I parked across the street and waited until I saw David's car pull into the lot. Through the window, I could see David and Jessica huddled around a desk with a woman I assumed was the listing agent. David was animated, gesturing excitedly as he showed them the power of attorney documents. I walked into the office 20 minutes later. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist. "I'm looking for information about a house listing. My house, actually." "Of course, sir. What's the address?" I gave her my address and waited while she looked it up in their system. "Oh yes, we have that one right here. Are you the owner?" "I am indeed, Harry Peterson." The color drained from her face. "But sir, there's a gentleman here right now with power of attorney arranging to list this property." "Is there?" I said mildly. "How interesting." The receptionist scurried away and returned with the listing agent, a nervous-looking woman in her 50s. "Mr. Peterson, but your son said you were living in Ireland now." "Did he? How peculiar. I've never been to Ireland in my life." The commotion drew David and Jessica from the conference room. When David saw me, his face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, terror, and finally, a desperate attempt at recovery. "Dad, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Dublin." "Did you? That's strange, because I've been right here in town the whole time." "But the phone calls, the hotel, called you from the Marriott downtown. Lovely place. Very convenient for keeping an eye on things while you thought I was gone." David's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Jessica had gone completely white. "I don't understand," David stammered. "Why would you lie about traveling?" "The same reason you lied about everything else. To see what you do when you thought you could get away with it." I turned to the listing agent. "Ma'am, I want you to know that I never authorized anyone to sell my house. These power of attorney documents are fraudulent." "But sir, they look legitimate." "I'm sure they do. My lawyer is very thorough. But if you call the number on those documents and speak to Robert Mitchell himself, you'll find that they're designed to trigger a fraud investigation the moment anyone tries to use them." David was backing toward the door now, Jessica close behind him. "We can explain this," he said desperately. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right. You misunderstood who you were dealing with." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized. "Detective Morrison, this is Harry Peterson. I'm ready to file those fraud charges we discussed." David and Jessica bolted for the door, but it was too late. I could already hear sirens in the distance. The chase was over. The trap had been sprung. And my son was about to learn that betraying family comes with consequences he'd never imagined. 6 months later, I sat in my new garden, watching Christian water the tomato plants we'd planted together. The modest 2-bedroom house I'd bought after selling the family home was perfect for an old man and his frequent young visitor. Smaller, yes, but filled with something the old house had lost: genuine love. The legal proceedings had been swift and decisive. David faced charges of attempted fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Jessica, it turned out, had a history of targeting vulnerable older men, and David had been just another mark who'd gotten in too deep. She'd plea-bargained for a reduced sentence in exchange for testifying against my son. David's debt, as it turned out, wasn't just from overspending. He'd been gambling, making increasingly desperate bets to try to dig himself out of the hole he'd created. By the time he'd latched on to Jessica's scheme to target me, he'd been facing bankruptcy and potential criminal charges from his creditors. The judge had been particularly harsh in his sentencing, noting that crimes against elderly family members represented a special kind of betrayal that struck at the heart of what families were supposed to mean. David was serving 3 years in state prison. I'd felt no satisfaction when the verdict was read. Only a deep, bone-weary sadness for the boy I'd raised and the man he'd become. But that sadness had gradually given way to something else: peace. "Grandpa, look!" Christian held up a tomato that was just beginning to turn red. "It's almost ready." "That's a beauty, buddy. We'll have the best tomatoes in the neighborhood." "Can we make sauce like Grandma used to?" "We absolutely can. I still have her recipe." I'd kept very few things from the old house when I'd sold it. Some photographs, my wife's recipe box, a few pieces of furniture that held special memories. The rest had been donated to charity, including the money from the sale that I didn't need for my new, simpler life. The trust fund I'd established for Christian would ensure his education and give him a solid start in life. But more importantly, it would teach him the value of earning what he received and the responsibility that came with privilege. Sandra had been devastated when she learned what David had been planning. She'd immediately revised the custody arrangement to give me regular visitation rights with Christian, and she'd been nothing but supportive of my efforts to maintain a strong relationship with my grandson. "I never liked Jessica," she'd confided to me one afternoon when she came to pick up Christian. "There was something cold about her, calculating. But I never imagined David could be capable of something like this." "David lost his way," I'd replied. "Maybe prison will help him find it again." But privately, I wasn't sure my son was capable of finding his way back to the person he'd once been. The capacity for such elaborate deception, such callous disregard for family bonds, suggested something fundamentally broken in his character. Still, I'd left the door open for reconciliation. I'd written him a letter shortly after his sentencing, letting him know that if he ever wanted to rebuild our relationship, I'd be willing to try. He'd never responded. "Grandpa, are you sad?" Christian asked, settling down beside me on the garden bench. "No, buddy, I'm not sad." "You looked sad for a minute." "I was just thinking about your dad." Christian was quiet for a moment. At 8 years old, he didn't fully understand what had happened, only that his father had done something wrong and was now living somewhere else as punishment. "Do you think Daddy will ever come home?" "I don't know, Christian. That's up to him." "I miss him sometimes." "That's okay. He's still your father, no matter what he did. It's okay to miss him." "But I'm glad I still have you." I put my arm around my grandson and pulled him close. "You'll always have me, buddy, I promise." And I meant it. Whatever years I had left, I intended to spend them being the grandfather Christian deserved, the father figure David had chosen not to be. The afternoon sun was warm on our faces as we sat together in comfortable silence. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the neighborhood, children playing, dogs barking, the gentle hum of ordinary life continuing as it always had. My phone rang, interrupting the peaceful moment. The caller ID showed Robert Mitchell's number. "Harry, I wanted to let you know that David's parole hearing has been scheduled. It's still 2 years away, but they're required to notify victims." "I understand. Thank you for letting me know. Are you planning to attend?" I looked at Christian, who was now chasing a butterfly around the garden, his laughter bright and pure in the afternoon air. "I don't think so, Robert. I've said everything I need to say. He might try to contact you as the hearing approaches. If he does, I'll deal with it then, but for now, I'm focused on moving forward." After I hung up, I remained on the bench, watching my grandson play. The boy who'd innocently delivered the news that shattered my world had also, unknowingly, given me the chance to build a better one. Kristen stopped chasing the butterfly and ran back to me, out of breath and grinning. "Grandpa, can we have ice cream for dinner?" "Ice cream for dinner? That's a terrible idea." "Please?" I pretended to consider this seriously. "Well, I suppose if we're having tomatoes from the garden, that counts as vegetables, and ice cream has calcium from milk. So it's healthy." "Practically a health food," I agreed solemnly. Christian giggled and threw his arms around my neck. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, buddy, more than you'll ever know." As we walked hand in hand toward the house, I thought about the choices that had brought us to this moment. David had chosen greed over love, deception over truth, betrayal over loyalty. Those choices had cost him everything: his freedom, his family, his integrity. But his choices had also given me something unexpected: clarity. For too many years, I'd defined myself by my role as David's father, measuring my worth by his success, his happiness, his approval. I'd made excuses for his selfishness, enabled his irresponsibility, and ignored the warning signs of his moral decay, because I couldn't bear to see the truth about what he'd become. Now, freed from those illusions, I could focus on what really mattered: being the grandfather Christian needed, living with integrity and purpose, and finding joy in the simple pleasures of an honest life. The house was quiet as we settled in for our ice cream dinner, Christian chattering about school and friends and the butterfly he'd almost caught. Outside, the sun was setting behind the maple trees I'd planted along the back fence, casting long shadows across our small but perfect garden. I'd spent 79 years learning that family wasn't just about blood relations or legal obligations. It was about choice, about commitment, about showing up for the people who needed you and trusting them to do the same. David had made his choice. I'd made mine. And sitting there with my grandson, surrounded by the life we were building together, I knew I'd chosen wisely. The old Harry Peterson, the man who'd been betrayed and almost destroyed by his own son, was gone. In his place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more at peace. Someone who understood that the deepest revenge against those who try to steal your life is to build a better one without them. Someone who'd learned that growing old doesn't have to mean growing weak, that experience can be a weapon as sharp as any blade, and that sometimes the greatest victory is simply surviving long enough to see your enemies defeat themselves. But most importantly, someone who discovered that it's never too late to start over, to choose love over bitterness, hope over cynicism, and the future over the past. As Christian finished his ice cream and curled up against my side to watch television, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete contentment. The war was over. The battles had been fought and won. And in the quiet peace of my new life, surrounded by genuine love and simple pleasures, I'd found something my son would never understand. I'd found home.